So here we are recording videos for YouTube and other social media platforms. So I feel like this is a great opportunity for us to talk about Christian maturity. What does Christian maturity look like? Because I don't know that we always see that in super visible ways, particularly on the internet, but let's give it a shot. Let's see if we can actually have a conversation about it using this medium. What is Christian maturity in your mind?
Yeah, the easier way for me to answer that off the jump is probably what is it not?
Yeah.
And work our way into what Christian maturity actually looks like. The simplest biblical answer is it looks like Jesus. And I think we're going to get to that in a little bit. But as we think about Christian maturity looking like Christ, it is looking like him in his heart, in his person, in his soul, who our Lord actually is, and not merely how he might appear on the externals. And so to begin a discussion on maturity, the hard part about it is we can only see what we see about people. We can really only see the externals. We can see what people say, how they act, how they behave. You brought up online. You see the externals online a lot. Externals can tell us some things. They can also be deceptive, right? They can tell us things that aren't necessarily true about someone.
Right.
And so part of this discussion we're going to get to in a moment about maturity is just the provenness over time. Yeah. And clicking on a video, the ironic thing, we're recording a video right now, but clicking on a video and watching 90 seconds is near impossible to tell if the person we're watching is mature. Turning on the news and seeing someone that looks dignified in a suit, you don't actually know if that person has any maturity at all. They are presenting as if they are wise, as if they have a certain level of mature character, but you really have no idea. And so one thought we've had as we talked before we hit record is just the inherent danger of judging based upon externals, judging on how somebody looks and acts in the snapshot of a moment or when the red light is on a YouTube channel, on a traditional news show, scrolling your phone, any of those things. And so I think that's kind of a top warning for me, and I'll get to maybe parse that a little bit, but it's just judging maturely purely on externals in a public context. Yeah. As somewhat public figures, at least in front of this pulpit, it is easier for us to put on a certain persona for 30 minutes or an hour, but not live that way the rest of the week. So, yeah, I'll come back to maybe what some of those externals might look like, but I think that's just a warning to start off with.
No, that's really the place to start. We, I think, intuitively know what immaturity looks like. We know what we don't want to look like. We describe things more in the negative off the jump more often than we're able to say positively what it is we want. I don't want that. I don't want to be like that. There is something powerful to that in terms of recognizing at least what we don't want to be like. Good. Now we got to fill that space, right? So I mean, you've mentioned in so many other contexts how easy it is to spot that immaturity in the room. It's going to take time to figure out who it is who's in the room, who is more mature. To say nothing, and we certainly don't probably have time to get into the hypocrisy angle that you just hinted at, right? Like you absolutely, I mean, we put these jackets on and do this, right? Yeah. So, but as we sort of take for granted the fact that you walk into a room, you can absolutely, almost intuitively tell who's immature because they're louder, because of whatever other characteristic. Now let's fill that space. Okay, I know what I don't want to look like. I don't want to look like that. Let's fill that space with what we do want to look like. How do we spot maturity in others?
Yeah, there's two things come to mind, but are also both paired with warnings. And one of those is sort of an intellectual maturity, just a growth in knowledge and content. And the other is a spiritual maturity, a closeness with Christ. Let me talk about sort of the dark sides of each of those, and then sort of fill them with the positive. One is just the intellectual knowledge that you turn on a YouTube channel, you turn on the news, you see someone at church, you see someone in your neighborhood, and they're super confident about everything they say. They see how all the parts fit together. They have an answer for everything. They seem to know everything. And initially, it can be impressive and it can be intimidating. I have a friend who talks about this saying about surgeons, right? That they're sometimes wrong, but never in doubt. And it's a surgeon who says that, and he's picking fun at his own profession, that in the surgery arena, you just got to go. You got to do it. You have to act with some level of certainty. As a potential patient myself, that's terrifying. And so even in the Christian sphere, I think we often mistake the wise men in the church, the wise women in our lives, as the ones who know the most, who can spout off verses, who can quote theologians, who know facts of church history. Those are all good and wonderful things.
Who always appear to know the right answer.
As the mature ones. So that's sort of one warning. A second warning I would give, and this is, I don't mean to sound like a skeptic here, but oftentimes the person in the room who sounds the most spiritual is not necessarily the most spiritual. The one who's quoting what God told them, or quoting what this verse means, or speaking of their constant personal relationship with Jesus. I am not intending to cast aspersions on people publicly speaking of their faith. Certainly not. But oftentimes Christians are deceived by upfront leaders and their supposed spirituality. And I think I wouldn't want us to doubt what people say, but I would want us to confirm through personal knowledge and lived out faithfulness through the years.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, there's a difference, in other words, between someone saying how spiritual they are and someone actually being spiritual.
Yeah.
There's a difference between, and this is one reason why even when we preach, we try not to talk about ourselves so much, because we would like our members to know our spirituality by how they see us live our lives, and sort of take that for granted as we come to the Word. Also, not to prop ourselves up maybe as the prime example, but instead Jesus is the prime example. But all that to say, you seem to be still keying in, I think importantly and rightly so, again, on what you see, and maybe I can say it this way now, what you hear, right? How do we tell when maybe our ears and our eyes are not matching?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to sound like a broken record. Time.
Yeah.
Time. And, I understand the irony that we're sitting here speaking of how to evaluate maturity, and we're sort of propping ourselves up as examples of maturity, which we don't intend to be. We were just sitting in the other room talking about this, naming people we know as mature. And, you didn't name me. I didn't name you. So, we're thinking of other more mature, right, people in our lives. And so I think knowing people in different contexts through time. We've recently gone through an officer nomination period in our church, and that's where we aim to know who these men are, not just how they appear up front, but know who they are, to nominate them. And so some warning signs, right, of performance spirituality and an overemphasis on intellectual knowledge. I think as we were reflecting on mature examples in our lives, one thing that stands out to me the most is the characteristic of humility. It is those men and women who don't actually think they're mature, who might not think that they have much to offer in a situation, who would readily take the back seat, not strategically so that they're offered the front seat, but because they actually don't believe they should be sitting in the driver's seat. They actually believe they should be sitting in the back. To me, that in of itself is a characteristic of humble maturity. And so that growing, I've heard a pastor say once, the way to grow up is to grow down. And so this downward growth before Christ and his throne of grace in humility will, in his timing and sovereignty, produce fruit of maturity that we might not even recognize in our own lives.
So you're saying, in other words, the visual or the immediate experience of the person who appears to have all the answers, who appears to have the right saying or the right quotation from some book or theologian or whatever in the moment is maybe not as much of a marker of maturity as somebody who is willing to say, I don't know, something like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. It's funny because it's sort of easiest. It's easy to spot the smartest person in the room. It's harder to spot the wisest person in the room, right? Because that takes time. Often you got to wait for the fools to reveal themselves and kind of go out of the way, and it's the person you never even noticed at first. But yeah, why is that? I think we have sort of maybe an improper estimation in our own eyes of what makes somebody mature. But I also think there's this upside down nature of life where people who become famous, people who have lots of YouTube channel followers, people that are propped up as exemplars in society and culture aren't only not often mature and wise, but it's often the very opposite behaviors that draws a crowd, that draws attention. It is, in fact, the immaturity, the impulsiveness, the brashness that draws a crowd. And we equate, at least in America, we sort of equate popularity with goodness or rightness or wisdom.
You have so many followers, so many views, so many whatever, and so you must be right.
Yeah. Charles Barkley, a famous basketball player, was famous for saying, "I'm not a role model." And he got blasted because all these parents thought, "No, you are a role model." And all he's saying is, "I just play basketball. And then I go party when I'm not playing basketball. I'm not a role model."
Right.
But we're built in to make our celebrities into exemplars of something.
Right.
And so, but the reason Charles Barkley is a celebrity is because he's good at basketball. And so the reason somebody might gain a big following or have a big news show or channel is not because of quiet, still, humble maturity. It's because they say provocative things, right? It's because they might present their performative spirituality and their overemphasis on their intellect. And so part of it, as I think, is rearranging our own brains, right? That for me to judge rightly who I want to follow, who I want to pay attention to, it's not necessarily where the crowd's going. It's not necessarily what draws a crowd. There's something different, and we need to rewire our brains to prioritize and recognize what those different qualities are.
Yeah. While we've been talking about these videos and how to do them and why we're doing them and all those different conversations, of course, the conversation about metrics came up, right?
Yeah. And
how many viewers and how many views.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah, that's right. So, it's inevitable. Again, I want to lean into the fact that there's a little bit of irony in this.
Yeah, there's a lot of irony.
But at the same time, in that conversation, I've been told, listen, if you want to blow up, do reaction videos. Mm-hmm. Do just like off the rip, play a clip of somebody else and then just rip into them. Mm-hmm. Just go after them in these short form videos. Why do you think it is that so many people find that compelling, find Charles Barkley compelling,
Charles Barkley's of the world.
Find like the person who, it takes maturity to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Or even more maturity, I think, to say, I was wrong. But so often, that's not the person we're compelled to follow. What's so compelling about the certainty?
Yeah.
The surgeon, sometimes I'm wrong, but I'm never in doubt. Why is that compelling to us?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not entirely sure why that is compelling. There's a version of it where sort of for Christians, we understand that we live for a different ethic and we're putting our sinful self to death and we're living for Christ, and Christ is meek and humble. And so we know we are leaning into that. But man, there's a little bit of part of us that just likes the idea of giving somebody what they deserve, right? Or showing somebody what's up, or sort of having our spokesmen, our celebrities kind of give in to our basest instincts and sort of like, that's what I want, because that's what winning looks like, or that's how we're gonna defeat the other side, or there's this zero-sum game of victory, and any sort of character, maturity, humility is just vacated in that equation because those things don't work.
Right.
Humble people don't win.
As long as our end is good, well, it doesn't really matter how we get there. The means are justified.
Yeah.
Right. That's not exactly what I think the scriptures teach. I think you agree with me on that. But I'm also just struck by the fact that how often does God have to repeat himself in the Bible? Vengeance is mine. I will repay. I mean, there is a sense in which, I think that one of the compelling things is the victory, and the reason that winning, you tired of winning yet, right? Is so compelling to us. I mean, beyond the fact that we want to win, is because we are in a way putting ourselves in the seat of Jesus, who will win, who has won, right? And who invites us into his victorious work. We've talked about that in various other places. But there is that age-old, sinful, fleshly tendency to, no, I want it now. I want to win now. So let's talk about time. I mean, you brought this up a couple times now. How can you tell other people are mature? How can you gain maturity? Earlier, you said we talk about time. Let's bring it up now. Why does patience come along with humility? Why is it necessary for patience to come along with humility for maturity?
A few ways to answer that. One is to tie it into what you just said, which in Martin Luther's phraseology is a theology of the cross versus a theology of glory. And the theologian of glory anticipates complete and total victory in this life. And the theologian of the cross recognizes that we are in the world of suffering, we're in the world of sorrow, that Christ is making all things new, but that will only culminate in his return. Sort of regardless of your millennial view, we're still in the right category of waiting until the consummation. It might look different based on your interpretation of the millennium. So I think big picture-wise, we just generally cannot expect in this life before the return of Christ to be completely in every category triumphant and victorious. That's sort of a foolish expectation.
Right. Jesus explicitly tells us to expect suffering and the hatred of the world because no servant is greater than their master. Right. So he scripted this for us. Yeah.
So the real kind of question you're asking is we're impatient with our own maturity or immaturity.
Certainly.
And we're aiming to see it proven in others. Again, to go back to officer qualifications, there's one in 1 Timothy 3 about an elder not being a recent convert.
Yeah.
And I think that's given for a number of reasons, one of which is just that needs to be proven over time. Right? Faith and faithfulness, it not only needs to be proven over time, it cannot reveal itself without time. Like faithfulness is the sustained expression of what is good and right and true over time. And so we can only see it take place over time.
Yeah, it's so interesting too how there's so many layers of meaning in that too, because we can even take for granted that a guy might have, by God's grace, in different ways, even have been a wise man before his conversion, right? Following many of the Proverbs, for example, just generally good wisdom. So he might be, above reproach, generally speaking, already. But it also takes time, not only to cultivate that character, it takes time, and this time is also vitally important, for other people to recognize that's what it is. You have to have both of these things. That's, I think, an often overlooked aspect to the entire conversation about maturity, is that sometimes you might be right. Sometimes you might be saying the correct thing. Sometimes everything might be right except the way you're communicating it. How people are receiving what you're saying is crucial. So both of these things have to play together, right? We don't want to say, well, just because you're a new convert means you don't have the qualifications yet. Well, you might, but the church needs time to see it, right? Both of those aspects, the optics, as it's often referred to, and the actual characteristics. They have to play together.
Yeah, and I think something that you hit on that we just want to make explicit here is that maturity actually takes time to form.
That's right.
That's just the mature tree started as the immature sapling, and that's just obvious. But it's not. It sort of takes maturity to recognize the obvious. Like you can't microwave maturity. But I remember thinking as a kid, like, why are my parents taking so much time to cook something on the stove or on the grill? There's a microwave right there. Why can't we just microwave it and it's ready to go in 60
Peel
seconds?
off your plastic top, right? Just put it in.
And for a 16-year-old, it's just as good as the slow-cooked meal.
Right.
But that's because I was immature. My digestive system was immature. And so now the slow-cooked food tastes better. Right. Slow-cooked food is better for you. Right? Those things taking place over time. I think about, one of my hobbies is woodworking, and the building things that are actually beautiful and sustainable take time, and they take real materials.
Trial and error.
Incredible skill.
Yeah.
Right? Anybody can go down to I'm not going to name the store, you know what store I'm thinking of, and just buy some cheap furniture and put it together with your Allen wrench. But that's not going to last more than 90 days, maybe a year and a half. But it's that furniture that you get from grandma or great-grandma that was handmade over months and years that actually sustains the test of time. And so that trying to apply those principles of the slow cooker, right, the slow approach to maturity, patience with ourselves, patience with others, patience with recognizing maturity to reveal itself from others. I understand I'm repeating patience a lot, but I think that's sort of a necessary element to this discussion.
Yeah, there's a sense in which, I mean, our world does not prize that type of patience. I mean, we live in the Amazon 2-day delivery, which has somehow become 1 day, overnight, same day in many places. There's, the instantaneous upgrade to delivering your food with these new apps and things. But then there's also just the regular human experience. I don't mean to pick on today's day and age. I think it's every day and age where, there's just a phase in life where suddenly you realize, where'd all my time go? But up until that point, you've been trying to hurry it up, right? The fact of the matter is we do live in a world that has been affected by sin. And so the impatience we experience is natural and not in a good way. And then once we learn patience, we realize how much time we've wasted. So talk to us how, you get to a point where you've cultivated over time some of these characteristics. You've surrounded yourself with other mature people. You've listened to the wisdom of, that oft-quoted passage of Titus 2, right? You surround yourself with these mature, older believers. Now you're doing some sort of inventory. I don't want to ask, how do you know you've made it? Because, that's obviously the wrong question. But how do you maintain those characteristics? How do you hold on to what you have? How do you not look back on the failures of your younger life and think, oh, wow, I wasted so much time? How do you say, wow, lessons learned? How do you hold on to those characteristics for even longer and stay mature instead of reverting back to being an immature?
Yeah, one of the sadder things is to see immature older people.
Yeah.
Sorry if
Don't be sorry.
if that hits anybody the wrong way.
No,
it's sad. And an immature young man makes sense.
Yeah, we expect it. Right?
Right?
Yeah.
It's grievous to see immaturity when, Proverbs says gray hair is a crown of glory, right? And so the natural order of things is for maturity to grow over time. So, you named some wonderful elements, right, of sort of growing in maturity, and I think those same elements sort of maintaining maturity, I guess. Obviously we start with the ordinary means of grace, right, word and prayer, sacrament, personal worship, public worship, family worship.
Beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord.
Right,
Yeah.
that has to be there. We don't take for granted mature, I was going to say friends, that's not even the right word, mature companions, acquaintances, a mature fellowship, right? Body. The Proverbs do warn us against foolish friends and warn us towards wise friends. And so, the people that you and I named before this recording who are mature in our lives are older men, generationally older men than us that we have really observed before anything else. Then we sort of sat down and gleaned their wisdom. It's just watching how they live, watching how they handle certain situations. And so I used an example recently in a sermon about I had to change the taillight on my truck, and I didn't know how to do it. You can laugh, maybe I should have known how to do it by this time in life. And so I got on YouTube, Googled the model, make, year of my truck, and what taillight, and it turned out I was pressing something the wrong way. It was all it was. Maybe I should have tried to find an older man in the church who owns a similar make, model truck and ask him how to change the taillight. So maybe I acted like I got it done quicker. I don't know that I'm any wiser. I have more knowledge now, but is there a chance that if I had spent 2 hours more, that I would have picked up some life lessons? I would have observed this man. I don't know. I'm creating a fictional mentor for myself, but I'm giving my example as a foil that the shortcut to get the thing done isn't often the long-term beneficial help to us, right? And so being involved in a community where there are older men, older women, mature contemporaries, even growing youth that we can learn things from, right, is of inestimable benefit. I don't think Christian maturity can realistically happen outside of people that you know and touch and get annoyed with and wish they were bringing more mature words of wisdom to you faster. You know what I mean? I think for all the things you can learn on YouTube or mainstream media, the long-term benefit of finding an older person in the church and just going out for coffee with them, going to help them do some yard work, having them over after church, and just learning from their lives is always and continually kind of beneficial for us.
Yeah. It just seems to me that one of the aspects of youthful foolishness, certainly that I experienced, certainly that I see others, now that I've experienced it, I know what to look for in others, is viewing the wisdom of older men and women as itself foolishness.
Yes.
Because they're just not moving fast enough, just because they're old. There's a very easy way to write them off. What I think I've learned, in addition to what you've already said, is that when I'm around those older people, and we're not, hey, give me your list of 10 top tips of maturity, but instead we're talking about sports, my child's sports team, or whatever normal small talky type stuff, I see them say things they shouldn't say. I hear that. I also see how they react to it. Mm-hmm. I hear them say things that appear to me, that was kind of foolish, but I see how quickly they recognize it in themselves. Mm-hmm. So we started by saying, very quick to see immaturity in others. I think that's true. Mm-hmm. Most people can. What we didn't talk about is how quick you are to see immaturity in yourself. Mm-hmm. Wise people are very quick to spot immaturity in themselves. And that's what I see a lot from an older generation. They're a lot quicker to say, I'm sorry. And that's a lesson that I think, young men and women need to learn. Mm-hmm. That's not a 90-second YouTube Shorts conversation to have over, a meal, in person, watching, experiencing the conversation about just normal stuff.
Yeah, and let me add to that, because I agree with you what you're saying. I think the comfort level with apologizing and owning immaturity and mistakes is because immaturity comes from within. Maturity comes from within. Right. But if maturity is purely without, if it's just the certainty with which we speak our doctrine, if it's the zeal with which we hold our position, right? Any crack in the facade is a sign of weakness. Mm-hmm. Whereas the confession, or the admitting we don't know, or we're sorry, that is, in the long run, it's a great sign of strength, right? Obviously. It's a sign of internal strength and character, because the external facade doesn't matter. Maturity says, I don't really care what you think about me. Right. Immaturity says, I'm desperate for you to think the right thing about me.
I have to have approval. Right? Yeah. So a couple of things that I know we agree with, I know that we're on the same page about, but I feel like are natural outworkings of some of these things we've just been talking about. I think a mature Christian believer sees the importance of the community of believers. Mm-hmm. And that word community gets tossed around like a buzzword constantly. But what I mean by it in this context is the importance of intergenerationalism. It's so easy. I mean, I'm very proud of you and me for not naming certain generations, right? And just giving the hot takes about those generations, right? But because when we come to the church, we want to be there needs to be old people. There needs to be young people, right? That's the ideal vision of the church. It's not just a community of people who are constantly saying the same thing, echo chambery, whatever, but it is this intergenerational vision. And so I think that there is a tendency for younger families even, people my age, to walk into a church and see more gray-haired people than not and say, oh, well, I guess this church isn't for me. Mm-hmm. I just want to say to them, it may actually be a sign of maturity to stay and to learn from those people and also teach them a few things too. It's always, brought up in that Titus 2 way, like the older teaches the younger. Well, actually, there is a two-way street there. And I think a lot of those wiser, older people might be the first to tell you that. At the same time, if you're looking around your church and you're only seeing gray-haired people, I think there's some questions to ask. So I say all that to just say, there's practical outworking here, other than just beating yourself up. Take a stock of your surroundings and see, the community of believers in your life, at your church. Where is it that you can find mature people, mature believers? Generally start with the leadership, right? I hope anyway, and start just cultivating those relationships with them. And see how then that changes your relationships with others. And then see how that affects the visitors who come. See how that affects the people in your community, your neighbors who don't know Christ. The outworkings of this principle, in other words, is everywhere and in every relationship you have. So again, those are just some top-level practical applications that I know we both agree with based on what we've been saying. What are some for you?
I think I probably just kind of close with the thought of, now that you've watched this video, don't go try to be mature.
Right.
Don't think about your own maturity, right? Because ultimately, maturity is a fruit that Christ is going to grow in us. And faith, we trust that he will in faith. And so go forth and think of yourself less. Right. Get your eyes out of the mirror, off yourself. And in that, I think you will find yourself growing in maturity.
Yeah.
And lean into humility, like lean into what you don't know, admit what you don't know. And don't look for certainty, especially not on the internet, or especially not on the TV shows. Right? Look to the other people that the Lord's placed in your life, and trust the Lord to bear that fruit in you. And I think you will find sooner rather than later that you are in fact growing in maturity.
Yeah. Don't just say he must increase, I must decrease, but actually desire that.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.